Hi, I'm Vanessa. At my sister's wedding, I paid $300,000 and still I was erased. Not a mistake, not a crop. Every photo, every memory they chose to share, I was nowhere. No seat at the family table, no name in the speeches. They called it a dream wedding. I funded it. But in the version they told the world, I didn't exist. That night, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. I pulled up every file, every email, every document. And there it was, my signature on something I never signed. A forged transfer. A fake authorization. They didn't just want to erase me from the pictures, they wanted to erase me from everything. Ever been told this is what family does while they quietly write you out of your own story? Drop a comment. Tell me where you're listening from and if you've ever had to give everything just to be included. Because I was never meant to disappear quietly. And they're about to learn that. I still don't understand how you ended up footing the entire bill, my coworker, Julie, said, sipping her latte as we wrapped up our Friday check-in at the office lounge. I forced a small smile and reached for my mug, the tea long gone cold. Family pressure, I said lightly. You know how it goes. Julie tilted her head. Sure, but 300 grand, that's not a loan, that's a mortgage. I gave a shrug I hoped looked casual. It was my sister's big day. My parents wanted it to be perfect. Julie didn't push further, thankfully. She always meant well, but she didn't know my family. Not really. That night, Boston was unusually quiet. The city lights flickered outside my condo windows, casting long shadows across my hardwood floors. I hadn't even changed out of my work clothes. My heels were still on, and my blazer clung to me like armor I hadn't removed. I sank into the couch and stared blankly at the wall. My phone buzzed against the coffee table. A message lit up the screen. Megan, my cousin from Illinois. Megan, wedding photos are up, just saw the album. You looked incredible. I blinked at the screen for a moment, then tapped the link. It opened a sleek gallery hosted by the venue's photography team. Langford Estate, Chicago suburbs. Cream roses. Outdoor aisle. Perfect light. I remember the sun was brutal that day, the grass damp and the humidity messing with everyone's hair. I'd stood through hours of photos, smiling through clenched teeth, posing wherever the coordinator pointed. First photo, full family shot beneath the rose arch. Mom in navy. Dad in gray. Sienna was beaming in her custom gown. Carter by her sidearm around her waist. Aunt Ruth, Uncle Daniel, even Great Aunt Millie, smiling. I leaned in. Where was I? I clicked to the next. Bridesmaids with Sienna. Then the groomsmen. Then a photo labeled immediate family. That one made my breath catch. It was the same photo we'd taken 3 times because Mom kept fussing over her corsage. I'd stood right beside Dad, one hand on his shoulder, the other, holding my clutch. Now, that space was filled with more tulle. A subtle repositioning, like I had never been there to begin with. I sat up straighter and flipped through more photos. Cake cutting. First dance. Toasts. Group shots on the stairs. Sienna's friends from NYU. Carter's coworkers from the firm. The officiant and his wife. Still no me. My stomach tightened. Maybe I'd missed one. Maybe I'd been blinking. I opened the shared drive again and tried searching for my name. Nothing. I clicked back to the text from Megan and typed a reply. Me, did you see any photos with me? I can't find myself in the album. 3 dots blinked. Then disappeared. No answer. I stood up, walked to my desk, and grabbed my laptop. I opened the link again, this time more carefully. Frame by frame. I remembered the shots. I remembered where I was standing. Who I was standing next to. I remembered Sienna making a joke about my shoes being too plain for the setting. I remembered Mom pulling me aside before the photos, whispering, "Don't wear that lipstick, it draws too much attention." I changed it because she asked. I remembered the photographer saying sisters together, big smiles, and Sienna wrapping her arm tightly around my waist. Where were those pictures? Another buzz. Another message. Megan, weird. I just noticed that too. Weird. I rubbed my forehead. Was this some kind of mistake? A knock at the door startled me. I walked over and opened it slowly. It was Mr. Allen, my elderly neighbor from across the hall. He was holding a small cardboard package. This was dropped off at my door by mistake, he said kindly. I took it. Thanks. Appreciate it. He studied me for a second. Everything okay, Vanessa? I'm fine, I said too quickly. He gave a polite nod and walked away. I closed the door and turned, leaning against it for a moment. My chest felt tight, like someone had wound a cord around my ribs and kept pulling. Back on the couch, I placed the box aside and opened my laptop again. The slideshow had started on its own. It moved slowly, each picture dissolving into the next with soft music. I watched silently, frame by frame, moment by moment. I had stood there, I had smiled. I had held bouquets, clinked glasses, hugged relatives, and yet frame by frame I was nowhere. I stared at the black screen for a long time, the hum of my laptop fan the only sound in the room. Then I reached for my phone and scrolled through my texts with Mom. The last thing she sent was a forwarded link to a floral centerpiece vendor 2 weeks before the wedding. No thank you, no great seeing you, nothing since. I hesitated, then tapped her contact and pressed call. It rang 3 times. Straight to voicemail. I didn't bother leaving a message. Next I tried Sienna. She picked up with a chirpy, "Hey Ness, everything okay?" My voice caught for a second. Yeah, I was just looking at the wedding photos. Megan sent me the album. Oh, weren't they gorgeous, she gushed. The estate looks like something out of a movie. Yeah, I said slowly. I just noticed. I'm not in any of them. Silence. A pause too long to be casual. Really, she said too brightly. Are you sure? Maybe it's just the angle or lighting. I was standing next to you for most of the family shots, Sienna, I said. I remember where I was. I remember posing. I remember what I wore. I was there. Another pause. I could hear something whirring in the background, maybe a blender, maybe the air conditioning. Well, Carter handled most of the final selections, she said. I didn't go through every frame. There were like hundreds. But you saw the final album I pressed. You approved it. Yeah, she admitted. But I figured the photographer just picked the best ones. You're probably in the raw files. You don't think it's strange that your sister, who paid for the entire thing, isn't in a single picture? Don't make it a big deal, Ness, she said quickly. It's not personal. The words felt like a slap. Right, I said tightly. Not personal. We hung up after a few more awkward lines. I tossed the phone onto the couch and sat there, letting the silence stretch. Not personal. It's what people say when they want to excuse something they don't want to own. I stood and walked to my bedroom, opened my closet and pulled out the soft blue silk dress I'd worn that day. The hem still carried a faint trace of champagne. I held it for a moment, as if the fabric might confirm I had in fact been there. Then another buzz. A new text from Mom. Mom, sweetheart, I'm sure the photo thing is just an oversight. Don't take it so seriously. Hope work's going well. Oversight. This from the same woman who once made me retake a professional headshot because my lipstick clashed with my blouse. I grabbed my laptop again and scrolled back to the slideshow. The final photo, Sienna and Carter dancing under string lights surrounded by family, played across the screen. Everyone was there. Except me. I opened my own photo cloud and searched my backups from that weekend. I'd taken several candid shots. Behind-the-scenes moments. The bridal suite. Mom fixing Sienna's necklace. Me pouring mimosas. Laughing with Dad outside the hotel. I clicked on a photo of the 3 of us, Mom, Sienna, and me smiling under the gazebo. Zooming in, I noticed something odd. In the background, in a mirror's reflection, I could see the photographer's screen. He was previewing the shot. In his hands, the display clearly showed all 3 of us. No cropping. No edits. I took a screenshot and saved it. The originals had me. Which meant someone had taken the time and the intention to remove me from the final selection. This wasn't a tech glitch. It wasn't an oversight. Someone made this decision. Approved it. Maybe even suggested it. A slow, quiet fire began to grow in my chest. Not hot rage, but something cooler. Sharper. They hadn't just excluded me from photos. They had erased me from a memory I paid for. A day I was forced to fund. A moment that, despite my presence, was crafted to pretend I didn't exist. But I did exist. And now I needed to know who decided I shouldn't. A month before the wedding, I flew into Chicago for what Mom called a family dinner to align expectations. The invitation came via text, no warmth, no details, just an address and time. It felt more like a summons than a request. When I arrived at my parents' house in Oak Glen, the table was already set. Linen napkins, crystal glasses, roasted lamb. The kind of presentation Mom saved for holidays and guilt trips. Dad stood as I entered, gesturing for me to sit. "Vanessa, you look busy." "Thanks," I replied flatly, shrugging off my coat. "You said it was important." Mom smiled tightly. "Of course. Sit, sweetheart. We have some exciting things to share." Sienna was already seated, scrolling through her phone, one leg tucked under the other. She looked up briefly and gave me a faint smile. "Hey, Ness." Her tone was light, but something about her calmness unsettled me. Dad cleared his throat and pulled a thick folder from the sideboard. He placed it at the center of the table with a deliberate weight. "This," he said, "is the final wedding plan." I blinked. "Final? We've worked hard with the planners," Mom said. "It's going to be elegant. Refined. The Langford estate has a wait list a year long, but we got it." I flipped open the folder. My eyes skimmed the numbers: venue, catering, floral design, custom lighting, live music, a horse-drawn carriage. Total $472,000. I laughed before I could stop myself. "You've got to be kidding." Mom's smile didn't falter. "Of course, the family's contributing. But we all felt you'd take the lead." Dad leaned forward. "You're the most successful one here, Vanessa. You're not married. No kids. Your expenses are minimal." I froze. "Minimal?" I repeated. "You think I'm hoarding money because I don't have a husband?" He raised his brows. "I'm saying you're in a position to help. This is what family does." I turned to Sienna. "Do you agree with this?" She tilted her head. "It's my wedding. I'm focused on planning, not finances." "How convenient," I muttered. Mom reached across the table, placing her hand gently over mine. "Darling, this is your chance to show love. Your sister is starting a new life. It's a blessing for the eldest to give." I stared at her. "A blessing or an obligation?" Dad didn't hesitate. "If you don't help, what will people think? We'd look ridiculous. You think your cousins are footing Bill's number, their families show up. We expect the same from you." A long silence fell over the room. Then Dad slid a paper toward me. A signed agreement. My name listed as the financial guarantor. I blinked at the line where my signature was supposed to go. "I'm not just writing a check," I asked. "You want me to sign a legal contract?" Mom's tone softened even more. "It's just for formality, to make bookings easier. They need someone established. They need someone who'll pay if something goes wrong," I snapped. "Vanessa," Dad warned, "this isn't the time to be difficult." I sat back, heart pounding. 100 thoughts raced through my head: how this would affect my credit, my business, my sanity. But their faces were firm, expectant. I looked again at Sienna. She offered a faint shrug. "You always handle things best, Ness. You're the reliable one." That was it. Reliable. I was never the favorite, never the delicate one, never the adored daughter. I was the dependable workhorse. I picked up the pen, hesitated for a second, too long, then signed. Dad slid the contract back into the folder the moment my hand lifted from the paper, like he couldn't wait another second to get it out of my reach. "Smart choice," he said, adjusting his glasses like it was a business deal sealed. Mom smiled and started clearing the plates. "Now we can finally focus on the celebration, not logistics." I just stared at my water glass, the condensation sliding down like it wanted to disappear too. Sienna pushed her chair back with a soft scrape on the hardwood. "I've got to meet Carter. We're doing a tasting downtown." She turned to me with that carefully polite smile. "Thanks again, Ness. You saved the day." Saved the day. Like I was a hired fixer. Not her sister. I nodded stiffly and stayed seated as she left. The front door clicked shut behind her, and it felt like something final had just happened. "Don't overthink it," Mom said, from the kitchen, rinsing dishes. "You've always been the strong one." I didn't answer. Dad stood and gathered his folder like it was a trophy. Glad we handled this maturely. I'll loop in the planner tomorrow. I finally looked up. Do you even hear yourselves? You treat me like a credit card with a heartbeat. Mom peeked around the kitchen wall. Vanessa, that's not fair. We're a family. Everyone does their part. No, I said. Everyone benefits. I foot the bill. Dad's expression hardened. You've always had a flair for drama. This is about duty. Funny, I said. I don't remember duty being part of Sienna's vocabulary. He didn't reply, just walked to the study and shut the door. I stayed at the table long after the chairs were empty. My dinner was cold. The napkin still folded in my lap untouched. It felt like I had eaten something rotten except I hadn't eaten it all. Later I drove back to my hotel in silence. The night air had that sharp edge Chicago gets in late September, the kind that creeps through your coat and sits in your bones. When I got to my room, I dropped my purse, toed off my heels, and sat on the bed. The folder was still in my bag. I pulled it out again, stared at the signature that was legally mine. Not a soul in that house had thanked me properly. Not my parents. Not my sister. Not even a nod that it might have been hard to commit nearly $500,000. It was just expected. And I had delivered. Like I always did. I opened my laptop, forwarded the contract to my lawyer with a single line. Please review this. I need to know if there's a way out. Even as I typed it, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about money. It was about position, control, power, and maybe removal. A quiet strategy to take my contributions and erase my presence. My phone buzzed again. Sienna, hey. Quick thing, can we use your Amex for the honeymoon deposit? Just to keep the bookings streamlined, I stared at the screen for a full minute. No, how are you? No, was that okay? Just a continuation of the assumption that I'd keep saying yes. I typed back, you'll need to go through Dad. I'm stepping back. 3 dots appeared, then nothing. I shut the phone off and set it face down. My heart wasn't pounding. I wasn't even shaking. What I felt was colder than anger. It was realization. They didn't see me as a person with limits, needs, or feelings. Just as someone useful. I looked at the folder one last time, then slid it into the drawer of the nightstand as if locking it away might dull its weight. And for the first time in years, I saw it clearly. This family wasn't mine in the way I had believed. They'd written me into the story as the provider. And quietly, they were writing me out of everything else. The morning after I signed, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Emails piled up. My assistant knocked twice to remind me about a 10 a.m. site walkthrough. I nodded, but I wasn't really there. I was back at the table in my parents' house, listening to the sound of my pen dragging across that paper. During lunch, I found myself scrolling through LinkedIn. Not out of curiosity, just muscle memory. That's when I saw it. Logan Whitmore has started a new position at Whitmore and Doyle LLP. My heart skipped. Logan. It had been, 15 years we'd lost touch after undergrad. He had moved to New York for law school. I went straight into the corporate grind. We exchanged holiday messages the first couple years, then silence. But Logan. He was the kind of person who remembered things you only said once. Who would notice when someone's smile didn't quite reach their eyes? Before I could overthink it, I clicked message. Boston just got a little more tolerable. Coffee sometime. He replied within 10 minutes. Only if you're buying. And if they still make blueberry muffins the size of your head at Jean's. We met that Saturday just like that. Jean's Cafe was a small place tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner in Beacon Hill. It hadn't changed at all. Same wobbly tables, same faded chalkboard menu, same smell of strong coffee and vanilla. He looked older, sure. A bit of gray at his temples. But his smile was exactly how I remembered, open, warm, a little crooked. You haven't aged a day, he said, pulling out my chair. You're clearly wearing the wrong glasses, I replied, laughing. We talked like no time had passed. He told me about cases he'd worked on, land disputes, business dissolutions, a scandal with a hedge fund client that nearly made headlines. I filled him in on my firm, the high-end interiors we designed in Boston and Cambridge, and a potential project coming up in Aspen. It was easy. Effortless. Like slipping into an old coat and finding it still fit perfectly. Then somewhere between my third sip of coffee and him picking apart his muffin, I mentioned the wedding. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out. I signed a contract to pay for my sister's entire wedding. I said, eyes still on the sugar packet. I was shredding. $300,000. Logan stilled. You signed a what now? I looked up. They presented it like a formality. A vendor agreement. My name on the payments just to make things smoother. He leaned forward slowly, brows furrowed. Did you have anyone review it? Number? It was my family. I trusted them. He didn't speak right away. Then, in a voice much quieter than before, he asked, do you still have it? I nodded. Scanned copy. It's on my laptop. He pulled out a small notepad from his coat pocket, still the same habit, and jotted something quickly. Then he looked up. Vanessa, I've seen this before. More times than I want to admit. Families handing someone a stack of papers dressed in sentiment. You're the guarantor, yes. No cosigner number. Any clause limiting your liability? I don't think so. He rubbed his jaw. That's not a favor, Vanessa. That's full financial exposure. If anything goes sideways, overruns, delays, defaults, you're liable. I tried to swallow. My mouth was dry. They wouldn't do that to me, I whispered. He looked at me, not with pity, not with judgment. Just stillness. Maybe he said, but you should know exactly what you're holding. Because I've seen what happens when people don't. Something inside me shifted. I had spent the last week feeling hurt. But now I felt alarmed. Because Logan didn't just see a family squabble. He saw something bigger. I left the cafe with a strange buzz under my skin. It wasn't just the caffeine. Logan had always been sharp, but now there was a steeliness to him, like he'd spent the last decade learning how to navigate people's worst intentions. And now he was aiming that focus at my family. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat at my dining table, and opened my laptop. I pulled up every file related to the wedding: emails, invoices, payment logs, the signed contract. Then I started digging. The numbers didn't add up. First, the venue upgrade fee, $42,500. It wasn't part of the original quote. No one had mentioned it to me yet. The invoice said, approved by client rep. Then the flowers. The original florist, a small boutique Sienna had gushed about, was replaced. The new vendor was 3 times the price and owned by a company in Nevada. That struck me as odd. The catering bill was worst. Initial quote $62,000. Final bill $87,000. I'd been told this was due to menu enhancements, but I'd never approved those. The email from the vendor confirmed changes were cleared by a woman named Elle Carter. My mother. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. They were using my name, but quietly shifting decisions behind my back. I clicked through email chains and found my name CC'd on threads never addressed directly, just included. Enough to claim I was in the loop. At 11:42 p.m. I emailed everything to Logan. Subject line, starting to see it. He called the next morning early. I read it all, he said. Vanessa, they're covering something. Or shifting liability. Either way, it's coordinated. I didn't speak. He continued, the floral vendor shell company. Registered to a P.O. box in Reno. The catering, same parent company as the event planner. That's not illegal, but it's fishy. So what does it mean? It means either they're laundering funds through this wedding or they're using your name to secure credit they couldn't get themselves. Possibly both. I felt nauseous. Why would they do that to me? Logan paused. Because you're the one with the clean name, steady income, no debt. Because you trust them. The words hit harder than I expected. He added gently. You're not just paying for a wedding, Vanessa. You're underwriting something. Later that day, I went to my office but couldn't focus. My mind kept circling back to small things: how my dad had insisted I be the anchor of the family, how my mom always praised Sienna's delicate creativity, but called my work functional. I remembered something else. At the rehearsal dinner, when I asked Sienna about the menu, she laughed and said, "Oh, you're so busy you don't have to worry about it. We've got it all handled." And I let them handle it all. because I thought giving them control would buy peace. Instead, it bought silence. Logan met me after work at a quiet bar in Back Bay. I brought printed copies of everything. He brought a yellow legal pad already half filled with notes. "Did you ever give them access to your accounts?" he asked. "Number. Just wired the main payment as agreed. The rest was on their end." He nodded. "Okay. That helps. But we'll need to verify nothing else has been opened under your name." "Like what? Credit cards? Short-term loans? Vendor financing?" "I've seen families do worse." He wasn't trying to scare me, but I was already scared, and underneath that fear something else was growing. Anger. Not just at the money, but at how easily they erased me. How methodically. How calmly. Logan tapped his pen once, then looked up. "I think they're planning something bigger than a party." Of course they were. The wedding was just the glitter. I leaned forward, heart hammering. "What are you talking about, Logan?" He pulled out a manila folder from his briefcase and opened it with a practiced hand. A stack of documents slid out, neatly clipped, flagged with colored tabs. He pushed one across the table. "Authorization of asset transfer," he said. "Your name's on it." I stared at the header. My full name in bold. My address. Even the last 4 digits of my social security number. "This was filed with the event planning company a month before the wedding," he said. "They tucked it in under the vendor agreements. I don't think they expected anyone to look closely." I flipped through the pages. Legal language blurred together. But the wording was clear enough. I had voluntarily relinquished all financial and legal claims to any assets or reimbursements related to the Carter Estate celebration event, hereinafter referred to as the Union of Sienna, Carter, and Colin Green. A trust fund was named as the beneficiary. Established under my name. Controlled by Sienna and Colin. My voice caught. "But I never signed this." "I didn't think you had," Logan replied. He rotated his laptop toward me. On the screen, a properties window showed document metadata created from an IP address registered to my parents' house. Created on the 2nd of April. Last edited by Linda C. My mother. I looked again at the signature at the bottom. It looked just like mine, just slightly too smooth. The R looped differently than I ever wrote it. Someone forged my signature. Logan nodded. "It's fraud. And if proven a felony." My stomach turned. What does this mean legally? Could they actually transfer something in my name if no one challenges it? Yes. Especially if they present this as your full consent. And given that you were the listed payer for all invoices, it paints the picture they wanted. My chest tightened. I thought about all the vendor calls I took, the invoices I paid directly from my business account. All under the assumption I was doing this for family. For love. But to them I was just a funding source. A means to an end. He flipped to another page. There's also this clause. It gives the trust authorization to represent your interests on any future disputes related to the event. They planned for blowback. Yes. Which means they knew exactly what they were doing. I leaned back, letting it all sink in. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. Coordinated. Papered over with forged documents, social niceties, and guilt trips. Logan broke the silence. And there's more. I pulled Sienna's recent social posts. He held up his phone, showing me her latest. A filtered brunch photo, Sienna holding a champagne flute, laughing with friends. The caption read, "Some people think the spotlight is theirs forever. Turns out some stories have new leads." Below, the comments were full of praise. "You deserve it. Finally your moment. Some people need to take several seats." And then one reply caught my eye. "Can't wait until the trust goes through. Y'all are golden." Sienna had liked that comment too. A deep chill ran through me. This wasn't a one-time scam, it was a transition plan. A silent handing off of legacy power, maybe even inheritance. And I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. From documents, from decisions, from family. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept circling one question. Why now? Why so carefully? By morning, I had printed every document I could access: bank transfers, emails, digital receipts. Logan met me at his office and spread them out like puzzle pieces on the table. "What am I looking at?" I asked, arms crossed tightly. He pointed to one paper-clipped bundle. This. This is the authorization form you supposedly signed to allow the Carter Family Trust to reroute funds for property reassignment. I blinked. "I never signed anything like that." "I didn't think so," he said. "But they attached your name. It's almost identical to your signature, but look closely, this loop here, you don't form your S like that." He rotated the document, then flipped it over. "And here's the real kicker, this file was generated from an IP address in Lancaster," he said. "Same zip code as your parents' house. Time-stamped exactly 3 days after your first wedding planning visit." A strange nausea rose in my throat. "So you're saying someone forged my name and submitted it from my parents' house?" "I'm saying," Logan said slowly, "they had access to everything, your driver's license, your old signatures, enough paperwork to mimic you legally." I sat down hard. The chair creaked beneath me. "They're trying to cut me out, aren't they?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Sienna had posted again. Another smug caption. "Some people just don't understand the role they're supposed to play." It was a photo of her in the bridal suite surrounded by bridesmaids, champagne in hand, laughing. But in the reflection of the mirror, I saw something chilling. A piece of paper on the vanity. My name. Typed under a section titled, Vendor Financial Responsibility. I zoomed in until the image blurred. I wasn't family. I wasn't guest. I was labeled a vendor. My blood ran cold. That night, I returned to my condo and pulled out an old photo album. A real one, leather-bound, from college. The yearbook from senior year. Logan had signed the inside cover. "To V, you're the only one who reads the fine print. Don't let them write over your worth." I hadn't understood it then. Now I felt it like a prophecy. I sent Logan the screenshot from Sienna's post. He called immediately. "They've crossed the line. If they're attaching your name to financial responsibility without consent, that's not just unethical. It's illegal. And the metadata proves they had access and intent. This isn't a mistake. It's strategy." The room spun slightly. I thought back to my childhood, how I was the planner, the achiever, the one who handled the chaos when my sister wrecked cars or lost jobs. I was always the dependable one. Now that dependability was being weaponized. And I had let them. "They're not just erasing me from the photos," I said softly. "They're revising history. They're rewriting everything I was supposed to inherit. Everything I worked for." Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We'll challenge it. We'll expose it. But you have to be ready, Vanessa. This won't be just about property or paperwork anymore." "What will it be about?" He hesitated. "Control. And they've had it for too long." I looked back at the Instagram post, at the laugh that didn't include me, at the caption that twisted the knife. Number. This wasn't just financial theft, it was character assassination. And the first step was forging my name. But the next step, they planned to erase it altogether. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by hundreds of printed wedding photos. I had them delivered in rush prints from 3 different sources, one from the photographer's online gallery, one from the cloud backup that auto-synced from my iPhone, and one from the link Sienna had shared with the family. I needed to see them on paper. Needed to see where I had gone. The living room felt cold despite the sunlight. I laid out the photos in rows: reception ceremony, family portraits, cake cutting. It was like piecing together a crime scene, one where I had once existed. I found one from the ceremony where I remembered standing right behind Sienna as she said her vows. In my phone's cloud, I saw my blurred silhouette next to Mom. In the studio version, I was gone. Airbrushed. The light behind Sienna was cleaner, brighter. My absence made the photo more symmetrical. There was a group shot in front of the estate archway. My Aunt Carol had handed me a bouquet that day and pulled me into the center. My version still showed that moment. The official one cropped. A tighter frame, as if I'd never been invited. I clenched my jaw. I called Logan. "Hey," I said, "I think I've found something." 20 minutes later, he was sitting across from me, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. I handed him 2 photos, one cloud, one official. He stared at them side by side. This isn't just removal, he said slowly. This is commissioned erasure. Professional. He flipped the studio print and checked the corner logo. Everly Images. They're big. Expensive. You said Sienna arranged the photographer. She did. She handled the media package. I just wrote the checks. Logan made a note in his pad. I want to talk to someone at Everly. Maybe off the record. I nodded. I don't want to go public. Not yet. He looked up. We won't. But if they altered images for someone else without your consent, and you're in those images, it's a violation of your image rights. We can pursue it under personal likeness and reputation laws. I was quiet. They didn't just erase me from the photos, Logan. They're trying to erase me from the story. He nodded, then gently asked, do you remember signing any release for image use number? Nothing formal. Not even an email confirmation. He leaned back. That's good. They can't claim you waived your rights. I stood up and grabbed the folder with the paper trail from the studio email. As I scanned through the forwarded messages between Sienna and Everly Images, one phrase made my stomach drop. Please ensure all group family portraits reflect the current guest list. Remove subject in purple dress from sets B and D. That was me. I handed Logan the printout. He read it. His eyebrows twitched. We need a statement from someone inside, he said. Even if it's anonymous. I hesitated, then remembered something. My old intern Darcy, her cousin, used to work at Everly's Chicago office. Let me see if she can connect us. As I dialed Darcy's number, my hands shook. Not from rage. From clarity. This wasn't neglect, this was intent. Logan spoke softly as I waited for the line to ring. You said your grandmother used to say something about truth. I nodded. She told me once, if people forget who you are, remind them gently. Not with anger, but with truth. The line picked up. Darcy's voice came through, sleepy and surprised. Vanessa, everything okay? I need a favor, I said. A quiet one. She listened. And then said, let me make a call. I hung up. Logan tapped the table slowly, deep in thought. You're not just dealing with vanity edits, he said. You're dealing with narrative control. I looked at the wall behind him. A shelf held an old framed photo of me and Grandma Margaret at my college graduation. She had her arm around me. She looked proud. They could Photoshop the wedding all they wanted. They couldn't touch that one. Logan leaned back on the couch, reviewing the screenshots I'd compiled. You said this studio handled everything right, yeah? Full package, photo, video edits, Sienna chose them. And you paid. All of it. He gave a sharp breath through his nose. I'll draft a letter of inquiry. If they altered images at the request of a third party without your consent, that's not just unethical, it may be grounds for legal action. I nodded, eyes locked on a photo where I remembered standing between my parents. In the final version, they were smiling alone. I'd vanished like I'd never been part of the family. I want to know exactly how much she paid to erase me. Logan raised an eyebrow. You think it was intentional? I turned to him, voice steadier than I felt. This wasn't an accident, it's coordinated. From the speeches to the table placement, the photos, and now the documents. He didn't argue. Instead, he stood and retrieved a slim envelope from his briefcase. I also ran a trace on the financials connected to the event. Guess what showed up? What a transfer of $15,000 labeled post-production revision fee. It was paid 2 weeks after the wedding. By Sienna. To the studio. I froze. That's after I'd already asked for the full album. She paid to edit you out, Vanessa. The words landed hard. It wasn't just about feelings anymore. It was proof. Real, deliberate proof. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out my planner, and opened to the page marked assets. It had my investments, my business holdings, and the house I still partly co-owned with my parents after we'd inherited it together years ago. Logan caught the glance. We need to check if anything's changed on the deed. I nodded. It was supposed to stay in both our names, and if it doesn't, then they forged something else. He pulled out his laptop and began typing rapidly, fingers moving like a pianist in a dark room. I got up and poured us both coffee, hands trembling slightly. On the counter sat an old jewelry box I hadn't opened in months. Inside was a USB stick labeled Margaret. Grandma's name. I plugged it in. There were photos of me as a kid laughing on the porch, drawings I made in first grade, and a short audio recording I didn't remember. I hit play. Her voice crackled to life. Baby girl, one day someone may try to silence you, erase your name from their memories. But you remember, this truth doesn't need permission. It only needs a voice. Yours. Tears prickled, but I held them back. When the audio ended, I looked up to see Logan watching quietly. She knew, I whispered. She believed in you, he said. And then my phone buzzed. A message. From someone I hadn't spoken to in years. It was Jenna, an old intern from my firm who now worked freelance in digital media. Saw your sister's wedding post. Thought it was weird you weren't in any photos. Need help digging? My breath caught. I texted back one word. Yes. Logan looked over. What's that? Backup, I said. And a new set of eyes. We were going to find every angle, every edit, every file. And when we had the whole picture, we'd bring it to light. Because they hadn't just tried to erase me from images, they were trying to erase me from memory, from legacy, from the legal record. But I wasn't going quietly, not this time. I parked across the street from my parents' house and sat there for a full minute. The porch light was on. Same wind chimes, same geraniums in the clay pot by the steps. But nothing about that house felt like mine anymore. Not even the driveway. I grabbed the folder off the passenger seat, evidence proof, the weight of every lie made visible on paper, and crossed the street. Mom answered the door. She smiled too quickly, like she had rehearsed it. Vanessa, you made it. I said I'd come, I replied, stepping inside. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and starch. Sunday dinner, just like old times. Except my stomach was tight, and I hadn't come hungry. Dad was already at the table, staring into a glass of scotch. Sienna stood near the buffet, phone in hand, scrolling like none of this mattered. I set the folder beside my plate. Hope everyone's appetite is strong, I said. Because I brought the main course. Sienna barely looked up. You're in a mood. I'm in the truth, I said. Let's eat. Dinner passed in strained conversation. Weather, work. A show Mom had been watching. She laughed too loudly at her own stories while Dad remained quiet. Sienna only spoke to critique the wine. I waited. I let the small talk simmer, let them believe they had control of the room. And then I opened the folder. What's this? Mom asked, her fork pausing midair. Receipts, I said. Contracts, metadata, photo logs. Copies of the wedding album, before and after edits. Sienna narrowed her eyes. You really went through all that trouble? I didn't go through anything, I said. I collected what was mine. I laid out the document showing the forged signature, my name, my handwriting style, everything just shy of a perfect match. This file was created from your home IP, I said to Mom and Dad. On a night I was in New York. You knew I didn't sign it. You counted on me not noticing. Dad shifted. That doesn't prove anything. IP addresses can be spoofed. Logan's voice echoed in my memory. Guilt always stutters first. And the edited wedding photos I added. The cloud logs. The statement from the intern at Shutter Row Studio. The one Sienna paid extra to digitally remove me. Sienna shrugged. So the final album looked better without you sulking in the background. My jaw clenched. You didn't just remove me, I said. You erased me. Mom's voice cracked. We didn't mean harm, but you meant silence, I said. You meant a mission. You meant to rewrite the story without me. Dad finally spoke. You're overreacting. No, I said calmly. I'm responding. I reached into my bag and pulled out another envelope, this one thick, stapled and notarized. I brought a copy, I said. Draft of the civil complaint. Fraud, defamation, digital tampering, impersonation. Mom went pale. You're suing your own family. No, I said, standing. I'm holding them accountable. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Sienna snapped. This is just about pictures and some paperwork. No one died. Not yet, I said quietly. But you buried someone. You just didn't send flowers. Dad stood. If you walk out with that, don't expect to walk back in. I nodded. I'm not coming back, I said. I came to give you the chance to make it right. Sienna sneered. Drama queen to the very end. No, I replied. Witness to the very beginning. Then I picked up my folder, tucked the envelope under my arm, and stepped out into the night. The air outside was colder than I remembered. I walked to the car without looking back, hands steady, heart not so much. The folder felt heavier now, like it carried more than just evidence. Like it carried every conversation I never had, every time I let things slide to keep the peace. I got in, closed the door, and let out a slow breath. Then I saw the porch light flicker. Sienna. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, phone still in hand. You really think this is going to change anything? She called out. I rolled the window down halfway. I think it already has, I said. She scoffed. No one's going to take your side. They know you're just bitter and dramatic. I'm not looking for sides, I said. I'm looking for truth, and legal grounds tend to favor that. She stepped forward. You'll regret this. You always come back. You always fold. Not this time, I said again, this time, just for her. She didn't reply. Just stood there shaking her head as I drove off. By the time I got back to my place, it was past 10. I placed the envelope on my desk and opened my laptop. Logan was online. Logan, everything okay? Me, went as expected. Logan, which means chaos. Me, pretty much. Logan, we're not done. I had something come in from the recorder's office. You need to see it. Me, now. Logan, yeah, now. 10 minutes later, he was at my door. He walked in, set his briefcase down, and opened it. A thin stack of printouts. One highlighted name, mine. These are recent filings, he said, spreading them on the table. Real estate transfer intents. Trust amendments. One line item stuck out: your parents' property reassigned to a family trust, but there's a clause, he pointed, that lists you as having waived all rights to contest. I stared at the highlighted section. My name again. The same fake signature. When was this filed? 3 weeks ago, he said. Right after the wedding. They moved fast. They always do when they think no one's watching. I ran a hand through my hair. They're cutting me out of everything. They already tried, Logan said. But this proves intent. We can go after them for more than fraud. This is premeditated. He handed me another folder. What's this? I asked. Financials. I pulled statements tied to the wedding vendors. Guess whose name is listed as the guarantor on 2 separate loans? I didn't have to guess. Me. He nodded. They never planned to reimburse you. They planned to tie you in. I leaned back, heart pounding. All these years I thought keeping my distance was peacekeeping. Turns out it was surrender. Logan looked at me. You still want to walk away? I didn't answer. Instead, I stood, walked to the window, looked out into the quiet Boston street. The city lights blinked far in the distance. Calm, detached. Exactly how I used to be. But not now. Now the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like permission they took and assumed I'd never question. I turned back to Logan. No, I said. I want to fight. He nodded. And we'll start with this. He pulled out one final sheet. A list of properties. 2 of them had been in my grandmother's name, assets she always said were meant for both me and Sienna. I thought they were never transferred, I said. They weren't, Logan replied. But last month your parents submitted probate documentation claiming sole surviving heirship through Sienna. But I'm very much alive. Exactly. I stared at the paper. They weren't just rewriting the story, they were erasing my existence from the ending. The knock came just past noon. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd barely touched my coffee. The day was gray, Boston rain misting the windows, and my inbox was full of legal drafts waiting for review. Another knock. Firmer. I opened the door and there he was. Carter. Sienna's husband. The groom from the 6-figure wedding I paid for. He looked awkward, like someone standing in the wrong room at the wrong time. He held a large manila envelope in both hands. I didn't know you had vanished, he said quietly. Not until I noticed you were gone. I didn't say anything. He cleared his throat. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but can I come? And I stepped aside. He entered like he wasn't sure if he was welcome or trespassing. His eyes scanned my apartment, simple, neat, filled with personal things. Books. Real photos. No curated lies. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he slid the envelope across the table. What's this? I asked. Proof, he said. And a confession. I opened it slowly. Inside were printed emails. Dozens of them. Most were between him and Linda, my mother. Discussions about the wedding budget, the condo Sienna wanted, even the joint application for a financing package using my name. I stopped at one subject line. Ensure Vanessa signs off. The body of the email was short. Push the vendor paperwork through before she asks questions. If she objects, we remind her it's family. I looked up at him. She sent this. He nodded. And you went along. He looked ashamed. I did. At the time I thought it was just family custom. You know, some people have strict traditions. Linda made it sound like you always took care of things. I gave a bitter laugh. That's one way to phrase used. He looked down. I started having doubts when the photos came back. I asked Sienna why you weren't in any of them. She said it was the photographer's mistake. But the edits looked deliberate. He pulled out another sheet. A copy of the prenup. At the bottom in bold it stated condo at 2,249 Wycliffe shall be secured as sole marital property under the bride's name prior to ceremony. That was supposed to be yours, wasn't it? He asked. I nodded slowly. Grandma left it to me. It wasn't finalized through probate, but it was always clear. Carter's voice softened. I didn't know. I swear. But when I started asking more, Sienna shut me down. Then Linda got involved. Said I needed to focus on the big picture of family unity. He paused. I realized unity meant silence. And complicity. I stared at the documents again. Everything we'd suspected now laid out in a neat stack. Why bring this to me now? His jaw clenched. Because last night I heard Linda talking to a lawyer on speakerphone. She was planning to shift your remaining share of the estate into a separate family account under Sienna's name. Said it would look cleaner after your exit. My exit, I repeated. They already decided I was gone. Carter looked at me this time with something heavier in his eyes. Regret, maybe. I don't want to be part of this anymore, he said. And if you need a witness, I'll sign. We sat in silence again. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not hope, not yet. But balance. A small weight lifted, shared. Someone else had finally stopped pretending. Carter sat still for a moment, like he didn't know how to move in a room filled with truth. I never wanted it to get this far, he said finally. When Sienna started planning the wedding, I thought it was all just extravagance. I figured fine, her sisters helping out families do that. But when I saw the guest list, when I saw your name wasn't even on the seating chart. He looked down at his hands. I should have said something then. But I didn't. You didn't say anything when they erased me from the photos, I said, not cruelly, just honestly. His jaw clenched. Because I didn't see it. I was too caught up in making sure her father approved of me. Your mother, your sister. They have a way of making silence feel like survival. I stood and walked toward the side table where I'd left the manila folder. I pulled it out and opened it wide on the coffee table between us. This is what survival looks like now, I said. A deposition. A paper trail. Emails. Contracts. He scanned the documents with tired eyes. I never saw these, he muttered. Of course not, I said. They were never meant for you. He shook his head. That prenup. I didn't even know about the clause guaranteeing the Wycliffe condo. I signed it thinking it was standard. But this, he tapped the line that named me as the financial origin for the down payment. This is theft. It's family tradition, I replied. They take from the one who has more, call it duty, and then rewrite the story so she was never part of it. He looked up sharply. And you let them? I narrowed my eyes. I let them stay comfortable. That's different. He took a long breath. Do you have a lawyer? Yes, Logan. His eyebrows rose. Logan Whitmore from Harvard. I nodded. He's helping me build the case. Quietly. I'll testify, he said before I could ask. I'll confirm everything I know. I've kept quiet too long. I didn't speak. I wanted to feel grateful, but I couldn't. Not yet. I know it doesn't undo what happened, he added softer now. But maybe it stops the next version. There it was, the legacy again. That word they all used. I walked back to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The clouds were low, restless. The kind that threatened thunder without warning. Behind me, Carter said, "There's something else." I turned. I found an email from Linda, sent to Sienna a week before the wedding. It outlines a contingency plan, what to do if you push back. What kind of plan, I asked. They were going to paint you as mentally unstable. Use your therapy records against you. Claim you were obsessed with controlling Sienna's life. My throat tightened. I went to therapy after Mom said I was too cold to love. I know. He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. I copied it. All of it. I stared at the small device in his palm, then took it slowly. Thank you, I said. This time, thank you actually matters. He nodded once, then reached for the door. As he left, I stood in the center of my apartment, heart pounding. The silence felt sharper now. I had spent years being their scapegoat, their checkbook, their revision. Now I had their blueprint. And for the first time, the truth had a witness. I took a long breath before picking up the pen again. This time, I wasn't signing anything under pressure. I was reviewing. Across my dining table, Logan had spread out every document in careful rows: legal letters, notarized testimonies, Carter's statement, metadata logs from the fake signature file, and screenshots of the missing photos. This is solid, he said, tapping the cover page of our complaint. We can file Monday morning. I reached for my tea. My fingers were steady now. Are you sure we've included everything I asked? Logan nodded. We have Carter's emails, the prenup clause listing your name as financial backer, and the studio's record of altered photos, plus we'll add your statement. I had written it the night before. It wasn't dramatic. It was precise. I listed every incident, dates, names, intent. No metaphors. No pleading. Just facts. Just truth. I didn't want to be here, I admitted. I wanted this to be solved quietly. It still can be, Logan said. But on your terms. He slid over the formal demand for restitution. It included repayment for the wedding expenses charged under my name, removal of any defamatory material posted online, and a request for public acknowledgement of the document forgery. They won't respond, I murmured. No, he said. But they'll read it. And they'll know you saw everything. I signed both sets of documents and placed them into the envelopes. Later that afternoon, Logan dropped them off for certified mailing. I watched him walk down the steps, envelopes tucked under his arm like truth sealed in paper. The next day, I opened my email to find a message from RISD. They were hosting a panel on ethics and creative ownership and invited me to speak. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw the name of the professor who sent it, Dr. Harmon. She had been my advisor years ago. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Yes, I typed. I would be honored. The morning of the talk, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting a small silver pin on my collar. It wasn't flashy. Just a quiet reminder I hadn't vanished. They had tried, but I was still here. At the university, the halls looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown. Students filed into the small auditorium. Someone handed me a schedule. My name was printed at the top. Vanessa Brooks, designing accountability when systems fail people. A strange calm settled in me. When it was my turn, I stepped up to the podium. I used to think my work spoke for itself, I began. That being quiet meant being professional. But silence doesn't protect people. It erases them. I watched the faces in the audience, some curious, some unsure, others nodding slowly. Ownership isn't just about credit. It's about standing by the truth when it's inconvenient. And knowing when your name has been used against you. After I finished, the room stayed still for a beat too long. Then came the applause, steady, unforced, real. Backstage, a young woman approached me holding a rolled paper. "We made this for you," she said shyly. I unrolled the sketch. It was a hand-drawn portrait, me standing with my arms crossed, looking directly forward. Beneath it was a handwritten line. "You belong where they can't erase you." I blinked fast, swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said softly. "You have no idea how much this means." Outside, the air was cool. Logan stood near the curb holding 2 coffees. He didn't say a word, just smiled as he handed me mine. I took it, wrapped both hands around the cup. In the quiet between us, I felt something settle. Not revenge. Not victory. Just recognition. Just peace. We drove in silence for most of the way home. The city lights blurred through the windshield as Logan took the long way back, like he knew I wasn't ready for the night to end. I held the sketch in my lap, smoothing the edges, running my thumb over the words. "You belong where they can't erase you." That sentence held more weight than I could say out loud. Logan glanced over at me at a red light. "You okay?" "I think so," I said. It's strange. It didn't fix everything, but it reminded me I exist beyond them. He nodded slowly. That's what truth does. Even when it's quiet. When we got to my place, he walked me to the door. I unlocked it but didn't go inside yet. Instead, I turned and faced him. "I don't know what's going to happen with the lawsuit," I said. "They'll probably deny everything. Drag it out. They might," he said. "But the process matters. The paper trail matters." "And if no one believes me?" I asked. Logan stepped closer. "You don't need the whole world to believe you. Just the record. Just one person, and I do." His voice was steady but not rehearsed. Like he wasn't trying to comfort me, just telling me something that had always been true. I looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Inside, the apartment felt warmer than I remembered. I laid the sketch on my desk next to the folder marked filed. Next to that, I added something new, a photo. One that hadn't been edited or shared. One from my own phone. It was me standing at the edge of the wedding venue, sunset behind me, smile faint but real. Nobody had touched this one. Nobody had deleted me from it. And I framed it. The following week, I received an email from the family's attorney. It was brief, 2 sentences rejecting all claims, citing lack of evidence, and asserting that any future attempts to defame the family would be met with countersuits. I didn't forward it to Logan. He had already told me this was likely. Instead, I replied, "See you in court." Then I turned off the computer and took a walk. It was early evening. I passed couples walking dogs, teenagers on bikes, a woman pushing a stroller. Nobody knew what had happened to me. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a loss. That night, I found a voice message on my phone from the number of the studio photographer. I hadn't expected a call. "Miss Brooks," he said. "I just wanted to say I found a backup drive we used on the wedding day. Before we did any edits. I thought it might matter. I'm mailing it to you." I paused, the message heart thudding. Then I hit play again. "Also, I'm sorry. I should have said no when they asked. But I didn't. I won't make that mistake again." I saved the voicemail. The next day, a small brown package arrived. Inside was the drive and a sticky note. "I hope these help put the pieces back." I plugged it into my laptop, and there I was. Not posed, not filtered. Just me. Laughing at something off camera. Fixing the hem of Sienna's gown, hugging my father. Every frame proof that I had been there. Every photo a counterargument to their version of events. They had rewritten captions. But they couldn't rewrite time. And they couldn't delete me from the lens I had held. Not anymore. What would you have done if you were me?